Welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast. I am Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host, a psychotherapist, writer, speaker, the private practice owner of Pinkerton Psychotherapy, and a connection expert. I help people reveal their connectedness within their relationships and sexuality, understanding root causes of beliefs and behaviors that hold them back from success, and assist them to returning to the person that they are born to be before they were limited by trauma, societal or social concerns, or attachment wounds. Redhead Reveal is here to share concerns and questions, provide interviews with thought leaders and friends, and to hold space to discuss life struggles and encourage vulnerability, authenticity, growth, and self-awareness. Good morning. I'm so excited to talk about my amazing guest today, Malia Scott. Malia is the owner of Rewiring Relationships, PLLC. She is a relationship and sex therapist and LBC associate. She's finishing her certification also through Integrative Sex Therapy Institute. And I've really got excited when I met her online because she had such an amazing connection with a lot of the same topics that I, really focus on. And so I was excited to meet somebody that shared some similar concepts and life approaches and the way she looks at things. Also, I'm a huge fan of Terry Real and RLT, and I know that's something she focuses on too. So anyway, with that introduction, I want to turn it over to you to let you really tell us, Malia, about yourself and give us kind of the overview. And I'm so glad you're here.
Sure. So I will try to snapshot it as best as possible.
Okay.
I think it's important to start that I was a yoga and tantra teacher for 20 years when I was in Boston. And before I switched over to the therapy realm, I was training yoga teachers. And then I just started to see and experience a lot of things come up. And I was like, I want to go back and get my clinical training. So went back to grad school, and I decided really early on in my first year of grad school that I wanted to focus on relationships and sex therapy because relationships are the foundation of everything in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I actually started with trauma training and learning about attachment all in my first year of grad school. And that gradually led into starting a sex therapy program through Shaw, in which I switched over to Integrative Sex Therapy Institute because there's more of a couples integration focus.
Okay.
So I have, I started my private practice as soon as I graduated, and I love private practice, and it's starting to weave its own web in a way where I love integrative therapy. My personality is not one to just train and learn one modality. So as far as relationship therapy goes, I love working with RLT and Terry's work, and then also the approach with Imago couples therapy and internal family systems. That's a lot of the learning that we're doing in the Integrative Sex Therapy Institute. So, and then the other key piece of the relational work I do is a relational trauma therapy with recovering from narcissistic abuse. So that holds a big piece of my heart too.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the areas that I focus on, and I've kind of brought in laying the foundation with attachment, education, bringing in love languages, apology languages, working with the erotic blueprints, whether I'm working with individuals or couples, and I'm starting to work with families too, but how all these layers can provide more in-depth tools and techniques for people to understand and communicate and listen and validate and empathize, and all the things that really help people feel seen and heard.
Absolutely. And, you touched on something that I try to focus on so often with couples. And in my wording, I call it the curiosity and the connection. And with that, you wrap up in when you say listening, because if we're not being curious and we're not listening, we're not waiting, we're not pausing to hear and to understand and to validate, That's just such a missed opportunity, and it goes right past us. I think that is such a fundamental aspect. And I love hearing that you're grounded in that as well. Because I feel like it when we enlighten couples with that different perspective, it can be really transformative.
Yes. Yes. And I'm seeing too now, the more I learn about the different approaches and appreciating them both for what they are, the RLT work and some of the Imago and the IFS, is that, couples will present so differently. Some of them are just in complete power dynamic shifts, and then others are ready to meet each other and get the tools to learn. So I think it's really important to know and understand different models, because some actually can be not so great depending on where the couple's at.
That's right. And, couples may have experienced a negative, negative connotation with couples therapy when they've been once before. They felt like it didn't work. And so often I believe it has to do with that mismatch of an approach, because it really depends on the presenting concerns. It really depends on how that couple is seeing each other. Are they open to being invited to a new perspective, or is that power dynamic preventing that? Do they have unhealed trauma from their attachment wounds that they haven't addressed? And how does that affect the relationship? Or are there parts? Do we just have child parts that are problematic? And the approaches you specifically referenced, the IFS and RLT, those two I employ as well. And I think that they make such a big difference. I was looking at all your information, and I love learning about you have an online course. And I think that having courses for people to take on their own so they can really get an idea about what this means for them from the privacy of their home, I think can also spur people to feel such a great comfort level with even seeking further therapy. How can they find your course? I want to mention that right now. What's the website that they go to find your course and purchase that?
So it's rewildingrelationships.com/online courses.
Okay, great. And then what about your ebook that you wrote? And it's about moving to secure attachment, right? You deal with the attachment styles of avoidant and anxious, and how that shows up, and how we all kind of want that holy grail of being in a secure attached relationship. How do we purchase your ebook?
It's on the same link,
okay.
rewildingrelationships.com/online courses. I love educating. I really do love teaching, and that part of that experience, for whether it's the individual or the couple, and letting them come into their own discovery and curiosity about where they come from their family of origin and their relationship history. And then when they have that new insight, they start to see each other differently. And then that's when I usually go through the ebook with them, with couples, like in session. So it's interactive. They're looking at one another. They're starting to incorporate Imago dialogue. And so it's just kind of like a gradual progression.
For sure. And I know that specifically you also deal with high conflict couples and grandiose behavior and power dynamics, which I do too. And I feel like the two of us might be a very small group of people that focus on that. And I would love to kind of hear your perspective on how that is dealt with in a relationship, and how can couples counseling address that high conflict behavior and grandiosity and those shame-based behaviors. What is your approach, and what do you think about that? How you help couples with that?
That's just so, in working with like bringing in the RLT approach, and then also parts work to let them experience what parts are coming up, even if they identify with one, and then teaching them how to speak to those parts, and getting a better understanding of maybe why that's happening, and then educating on boundaries, educating on there's a big education component. I feel like sometimes I think that's why the ebooks are necessary, so they can do the work in between sessions.
I mean, psychoeducation, I think sometimes is half the battle, because so many people are just they're just kind of going through the motions in the relationship without having understanding of why. And I think the why is our epiphany. The why we are the way we are sometimes gives us the motivation to want to shift and grow. And
Yeah.
without understanding the why, sometimes that motivation's lacking because we don't really recognize there's something wrong with us. They don't really recognize there's something wrong with our behaviors, and how that can create this dysfunction relationally.
Yes. And getting them to educating and then seeing if they can get to the place where they can see maybe where they're one up or one down,
right?
like boundaryless, or completely just rigid, trying to get them to understand, and then kind of seeing if we can get into this place of bringing them back into homeostasis. And then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's very interesting, case by case.
And what do you think about when couples come in and they're really highly escalated? They're really fighting, and they're fighting in the room. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of tension. How do you, as a therapist who specializes with these facets, how do you handle that? What is your approach?
Again, I'll bring in psychoeducation on our nervous system and how our brains work. And, there's a lot of adults that come in that don't have self-regulation strategies. So I'll, like, in some of the sessions, literally it's like identifying what are some self-regulation strategies for you? What are some for you? Let's look at your attachment style. Let's look at your attachment style. Let's understand what's triggering you. And then you go and you practice, you start to build your toolbox of self-regulation strategies so we can get into the couple session and learn how to co-regulate.
Yes.
So,
and I view that kind of as flexing the muscle. We have to flex these muscles that we really may not use often. And, co-regulation, I think being able to sit still with your partner, being able to match energy, being able to recognize that we're going to match that energy, those neural pathways. And I think it's such a unique thing to share. And a lot of people don't get that. I love hearing that you're into that co-regulation. How do you employ that with your clients in sessions? What do you do?
Well, a number of different things. Having them face one another. I would say like 1 in 3 couples I see, one is presenting with ADHD too. I have it, so I like to move around. So
Sure.
I'm starting to shift. I see people online, but also in person. So in person, I have them sit in different places of the room so they can move around. Sometimes I'll have them kind of drawing in from my Tantra background, and depending where they are in the situation and the circumstance, I'll have them do some just basic eye gazing, or just bring in the somatic work of, just kind of like, I would say partner yoga for the layman's terms, but learning how to use touch and breath and self-awareness and grounding skills, doing that together, but also staying present in their own experience.
And being able to sit still in that presence, being able to recognize that there's so much power and energy there, and learning how to harness that and embody that, I think is really huge.
Yeah, I do find that the talk is great and important, but some of the somatic pieces are important too.
Right. And for the audience who maybe some people aren't really understanding what somatic is, I like to kind of explain that. Being able to utilize somatic work in therapy is about connecting the mind and body together, being able to recognize how paying attention to how the body's reacting and the body's feeling, and how trauma is stored in the body, and how our feelings are stored in the body, and what that looks like, connecting that with different modalities of therapy and being able to integrate that connection, I think is important for people to understand what that means by somatic work. And there's a lot of different types of approaches that utilize that. But the concepts, I think, are all the same. That the underlying concept would be to understand the connection between the mind and the body, and how we have to have that connection with the body in order to work on the mind, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so I kind of
the soma piece, like of the body in the body.
100%. And I love knowing that you do that. You mentioned Tantra too. I know that you also do specialize being in sex therapy. You do intimacy work as well. Tell me how that plays into that, and how often, and how that works. How do you integrate that into your work with your clients?
Sure. And shout out to Dr. Tammy Nelson. She's been an integral piece in helping me understand and helping me integrate it into the couples work. So helping couples understand that there's different aspects of the relationship. And so we're nurturing the companion, friendship, roommate, house manager, depending on if there's kids or not.
Roles, right? Yes.
Yeah, the roles. And then also the erotic, the intimacy, the connectedness, the sex, the senses. How do we do that? How do we talk about it? And then how do we bring in tools and techniques to go about doing that? And so I also kind of layer in Jaya's work with the erotic blueprints. And it does, I mean, it's a great assessment. It definitely doesn't fit everybody into like the 5 types, but I think she's done such a great job with that. So I'll educate my couples on the erotic blueprints. And then I created it's just like it's another ebook called the Pleasure Constellation Map. So it teaches couples, it's like adult sex ed in a sense of like, going through the different erogenous zones, figuring out what those are for yourself, figuring out what those are for your partner, and then learning to have conversations about that. And there's other great tools out there. OMG, yes, I refer to them
I
a lot.
love OMG, yes. Yes, I refer all my clients to OMG, yes, too.
They have done a really great job because I can sit about and talk about it all day, but my skill set is not like the visual of showing how to. So I feel like they have really filled a need as far as like being able to have a visual for that erotic discovery or rediscovery. I'm also a huge fan of Pamela Madsen. She's just amazing with the work that she's doing. So I think it's, I see a lot of couples, there's still so much rooted shame around sex.
Yes. Oh, yes, so much so.
Unbelievable that we're living in 2023 and that's still the case. So, just meeting them where they are, seeing where they are, and then just slowly kind of opening Pandora's box to see what's possible, and then tracking progress over time. And then, how do we also love Esther Perel's work, and like, how do we balance autonomy versus interdependence, and how does that play into the relationship with balancing the companionship, friendship, roommate, home manager, and the erotic parts of the relationship. So,
and that's true because so many couples get lost in the business of marriage, the business aspect of marriage, and forget that, we weren't attracted to each other about how we could help each other. Weren't initially attracted to each other thinking about, wow, we're going to be great sharers of space and a roommate. We were attracted to each other because of connection and intimacy and passion and these shared beliefs and this commonality. And so often when people have been together a long time, those very basic fundamentals are what's lost. And then what remains is the business of marriage or the business of a relationship. And that's not sexy. And it doesn't keep people cemented together. The impetus to see is there's something else out there suddenly becomes, something that people can get aware of. And so it's so important to recognize that. And I love hearing all this embodiment work you do and really trying to bring couples to a place where they can sit still and be present and recognize within their presence, what is that? You mentioned senses. And I think senses is a huge part of what is missing when people come with presenting concerns about having a lack of intimacy. Are you able to even have that awareness of your senses during moments of intimate connection?
Yes. Yeah, the sensing piece, and then I was gonna say something else. The thought just lost. I just lost it. It'll come back.
It'll come back to you. We're in a conversation here. When you remember, you just tell me. It's great.
Yeah. Okay, so I have some other points in here. Oh, let's see. Oh, and just kind of like adding to so much of the importance too is the willingness and putting it into practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if we're working on rediscovery of the erotic, there's I love Esther Perel's 150 questions about sex. There's so many great tools
Yes.
out
Oh, it's
there.
wonderful.
Like getting them to talk first and have the safe conversations around sex and intimacy, and then giving them the piece of play and exploration, because adults forget how to play. And
Well, and play means something different sometimes than I think what we mean it when you and I are talking about it in this way.
yeah,
The playfulness of being silly, the playfulness of connection and flirting. You know, I often see couples that they say, "Oh, yeah, I'm playful. I come over and smack my girlfriend on her ass." Well, that's not necessarily maybe what playful to her. It's
right.
more about the idea of we're flirting and we're being silly and we're being light and we're being interested in the idea of sex. And I think that's very different sometimes than the idea of what play means to other people. Do you find that sometimes that there's that
do.
disconnect?
I do, and I encourage couples to reevaluate, because like what turned you on last year might be different than what turned you on this year.
That's right.
So having those conversations about just like rediscovery, reevaluating,
Mhm.
seeing where you are now, and understanding that we all change, and hopefully we're changing as we're growing as individuals, and we're also learning on how to grow as a couple.
Mhm.
So reevaluating with goals and inspiration and relational values, like those change over time. So in the longer term relationships or couples that we're working with, that's a key piece to it. Because after the almost 2 year mark, then we're shifting into the power struggle, power dynamic zone of relationships. And it's easy to get lost in the hamster wheel of things.
Absolutely. And where is your practice located for people who want to come see you and want to schedule a session with you? Where are you
Sure.
again?
So I'm located in Lubbock, Texas.
Lubbock. Okay.
I relocated back to West Texas. I never thought I'd move back, but I did. And but I see a lot of my practice is about 80% online.
Mhm. That's great. I
So
think there's this simplicity of that a lot of people grasped onto during a time we had to be online, and a lot of people haven't left that. I think it's great. I love to offer the same with my clients too and give them those choices.
I am really grateful we have the flexibility of that in our field now.
Mm-hmm. I know that you had an interview you had done, I think, on narcissistic abuse recovery, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that because
Yeah.
that grandiose behavior, I think a lot of therapists don't know how to address that, and you do. You've got the skill set to do that, and I think a lot of people look for someone. I treat that as well, but some people kind of shy away from that. And so when I find another therapist that really understands it and engages with that, I love to be able to talk about that. What would you like to share with people about your experience with that and how you work with that?
Sure. So if I could kind of break it down into like the individual side, and then like
Right.
also kind of like the couple side that I work with.
Okay.
With the individual piece. So when I first started my private practice, I was leading groups, and I love leading groups, but life has just kind of given me a break from leading groups. After leading groups, creating the online course, so now I really send people to the online course for the psycho ed piece. And when I work with individuals that have either narcissistic abuse from family system, or a current partner, previous partner, previous partners, meet them where they are as far as like understanding where they are on the spectrum, because some of them are like in it and don't even know they're in it. So there's the discovery.
Yes.
And then I've kind of come up with this term snow globe. So for people that have experienced narcissistic abuse, and they know what's going on and they're doing the work to heal from it, and then they step out of the snow globe. So they're not in the abuse cycle. They're learning how to break trauma bonds. And once we get to the other side and step out of the snow globe, all the snowflakes settle.
That's a great analogy. I love that visual that you're able to give your clients.
And then once they're out of the snow globe, then we're working on assertiveness skills. We're working on boundaries. We're working on what are things to look for in healthy relationships. A lot of them are just starting to date again. And then once they are dating or in another relationship, then there's a whole other, it's like a whole different snow globe that happens where they're ricocheting back and forth between, I used to be treated this certain way, but now I'm with somebody healthy and that feels uncomfortable. And I want to
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's such a wide spectrum. And then as far as, I do see a lot of couples that either have an ex that was narcissistic, that they experienced like narcissistic abuse, or parent or parents that are affecting it. So it's interesting in that regard that it's kind of applying the same work of psychoeducation, assertiveness skills, confrontation skills, creating boundaries, what's a healthy boundary, what's not a healthy boundary, but applying it to more of the couples dynamic.
I believe that it's very difficult to heal in the same environment that made you sick.
Yes.
And that concept is one that really applies to this, because I think if someone is in an active relationship with that dynamic, it's very difficult to heal from that. But as you're talking about with the snow globe, once they're able to step out from that, life looks very different, and then there's this opportunity to embrace this idea of understanding the red flags or the green flags in dating, and going in that with an understanding and knowledge that this is going to feel very different when I actually start attracting a healthy partner. And when I'm in a relationship with someone healthy, it's going to feel foreign and I may not like it, because I may have come to learn that love equals chaos, and that love equals earning love. And that if I'm not having to constantly prove myself, maybe this doesn't feel right to me. And I think that's such a missing piece when it comes from the healing standpoint and the moving on standpoint from those type of relationships.
Yeah, because they're essentially discovering a completely new way of being who they are. It's a brand new identity. And it's really beautiful to watch to witness that healing, that transformational process. Since you mentioned green flags too, I wanted to mention Green Flags Dating, because they're Crystal DeSantis is a therapist in Austin, and she is one of their she's on, I believe it's their board, and maybe hopefully I don't quote that wrong, but Green Flags Dating is a new dating app that has attachment training, education, and they have a vision for healthy dating and healthy relationship education. So you mentioned green flags, and
that's great. I mean, the more knowledge we have out there, the more that people understand, what they deserve. What is it supposed to look like? Because some people have no idea. Nothing has been modeled for them. They haven't experienced that. They have basically, repeated what wasn't healed in attachment wounds. And they exist in relationships and have no idea that this is completely not the way it's supposed to look like. There's no baseline, there's no barometer for that. So I think the more types of tools and approaches that are out there that help, provide the psychoeducation to understand what people need to look for relationally is only going to really improve things for everybody across the board.
Yes. Yeah. And I think too, adding in like the parenting piece, like adults that come from family systems that might have narcissistic abuse, unlearning, relearning, and then creating a whole new way of parenting and creating their family dynamic that's healthy.
Well, we don't want to give our children a childhood to heal from. We want to try to show up in the best and most healthy way, recognizing, to have that same things that we really talk about relationally, to have curiosity, to have validation, to have the emotional attunement. Those are the things that are proven to be the healthiest foundations. And to me, it's across the board, whether you're talking about parenting, whether you're talking about with a friendship, whether you're talking about a relationship, those concepts are universal in that way.
Yeah. When I learned from Dr. Romani that narcissistic abuse can go back like seven generations, at first when I heard that, it was kind of jaw-dropping, and just the more experience and the more just sitting with clients and hearing, like it makes total sense now.
Well, we know that being someone who's experienced that abuse does a rewiring in our brain. I mean, we know that. And so it's pretty, makes sense if you think about it. If you've had this rewiring fundamentally in your brain and the way you look at things, then you're going to pass on that generational trauma. Until you've healed it, it's going to be repeated. And those cycles continue on and on and on. But I do think that there's a more of an awareness now of it, the least idea of something people can say, this doesn't feel healthy. Yeah. Or in the past, I don't think that was truly a concept that was embraced,
Yeah. Yeah. As a collective, some days it's a struggle to hear about all the pain and the trauma. And then other days it's a waking up with so much hope in the collective, hearing and talking with other therapists across the country and being in trainings and seeing that there are healing tools available more and more, and that hopefully we're implementing healthy tips and just, again, education to move forwards for as best of a world that we can create for what we have.
And when we have people like you who are writing books, who are putting out information, who are giving your clients ways to really takes in my mind some control and empowerment of being able to learn on this and to take that and apply that to the relationships, I think is huge. Excuse me. I wanted to also mention your social handles too. They're at Rewilding Relationships, and people can go there and probably get a lot of information from you in that way too. That and your website, rewildingrelationships.com, correct?
Yes.
Good. I wanted to also mention too, we have the thing we do here on this podcast where I'd love to ask you to leave a question for a future guest, something that you think might be worth in thinking about, a concept, an idea. And then I have a question to ask you that a former guest has left.
Oh, I love that.
So I'm going to give you that one first, and you can kind of be thinking about what you might want to ask back. But a recent guest said, if my greatest strength is a compensating strategy, then what is my greatest strength for? So if their greatest strength is learning how to compensate and learning how to handle that, then what are they doing that for? What is the reason for that? What do you think about that?
That makes me think about my purpose in being a therapist, is how can we work with our pain, heal our pain, and then recycle our pain into purpose.
Well, that's beautifully said. I love
that. And since we're talking too about the sex and the pleasure piece, not just purpose, but pleasure.
Yes.
Pain and pleasure, as we know in the brain, work very closely together. And I see that as an opportunity, and when it's hitting you and when you're in the trenches and you're in the pain and you're in the trauma, you can't see out of the woods a lot of the times. But when you give yourself time and space to heal and grow, then there might be an opportunity to help other people in that.
I love that. I really love that. What question do you think you might want to leave for a future guest? Is there something you can think of that you might want to challenge them with?
I'm thinking, I'm looking at some different words in my notes.
Because I find it's it's when we given a question that's off the topic of what we're thinking about, we start to look at the way everything does connect, and challenging us to level up and step up and to live a life where we're thriving.
Mm-hmm. So do you mainly interview therapists?
I do therapists, thought leaders, book authors, anyone within that space.
Okay.
Anyone that's here to be someone that wants to help people heal in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like. So,
okay. I love the question, how can we so in different industries, I guess I'm speaking to the therapy industry that I've noticed since I've been in it
yes.
6 years, is the narrative around the fear of abundance.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that story and that narrative a lot. So
I do agree with you.
so,
How can we
so
shape
whether
the question?
how can we how can we shape shift that into how it applies to you? Because when I noticed that narrative show up in a lot of different spaces, I sat myself down and I was like, where is that present in your practice or your mindset or thought belief?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started just making some changes and I saw some changes happen. And so I guess that's my question to propose.
That's great. I love that. And I'm looking forward to hear how someone else answers that. And, I try to connect my episodes in that way.
Love that.
Be able to get that answer from a future guest. So check back with us on that. Okay.
I will
I really have
definitely.
loved getting to visit with you, Malia, and I think you're amazing and you're doing so many amazing things and really making a lot of positive change for people. And I'm really glad to have made this connection with you.
It was a great conversation and thank you so much for having me today.
One more time, if anyone wants to find Malia, it's rewildingrelationships.com, right?
Yep.
You can also email you at Malia, Malia, at therapywithmalia.com as well, right? Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, and we'll stay in touch. And if I'm
Yes,
ever making it down to Lubbock, I'm going to look you up. And if you come to Houston, please do the same.
I will. And have a
Okay.
happy
All
Halloween.
right. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.